You're listening to the Coop Homeschool Podcast.
This is your podcast for community, humility, and joyful fun in homeschooling. I'm Andy.
I'm Jessica.
And this is
The Coop.
It's chapter 1 today for our book club.
So this is our random continuation since we decided to cut off the preface and not give you an hour and a half episode.
Exactly. So this is Dumbing Us Down, chapter 1.
Yep.
And if you want to know about the preface, which is awesome,
Yep.
you will want to tune in to the previous book club episode from last month. So let's start off with our scoop on the coop. Jessie?
Okay. We're gearing up to go camping with your family.
Oh, yeah. So I think this is a shared scoop.
I guess so, yeah. So we now have this annual tradition every August. Our families go camping together. And it's been with another family before, and sometimes my parents come up for a visit. And we just have a blast. And so our husbands were here tonight. It was all spontaneous too. It was really fun.
I know. Me, spontaneous? I plan every minute out.
Right.
There's never any room for spontaneity.
Oh, that's not true. You are impulsive too.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
So it just means you didn't plan for your spontaneity.
Yeah.
But it does happen.
Anyhow.
Whether you wanted to or not. But anyway, both of our husbands ended up here at Mandy's house. We all had pizza, and it was delightful getting to talk and hang out. And we ended up planning our camping food and all that stuff. So I'm super excited that we get to go camping together.
Yeah. So, all right, let's get started with our book club.
Yes. So the most important thing I think we need to note about this chapter is that it's actually his speech that he gave on the occasion of being named New York State Teacher of the Year for 1991.
Yeah, and that makes it fun.
And that makes it fun. So I thought I would start by asking you.
Oh, wait, real quick.
Yes.
The book was published in 92.
Right.
So this is pretty current for the book.
Right. So at the time this was published, that was a new speech for him. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So my question to you is, what did you feel is the author's tone?
Okay, so his tone, the disappointment and the devastation that the traditional school causes to our children.
Totally. And then, we'll get into the details of what's in this speech, but knowing that it's a speech, it almost made me laugh because the tone is almost even snarky.
Yeah, I mean, I'm imagining...
Right, because who's his audience? When you're giving this speech for your Teacher of the Year award, who is your audience?
Teachers.
Other educators.
And administrators, yeah.
Oh my goodness.
It's insane.
Right. So I wanted to preface chapter 1 with that information to you.
He probably loved seeing all their faces, like the shock.
Yeah, I would have loved to know this man.
Oh, I know. Yeah, how
he
would
reminds
he be in
me of
social
maybe my
situation?
husband.
Yeah.
My husband might give a speech like this.
Yeah, he cares about veritas, about truth.
Right.
And not about coddling the people who can handle the truth. Like he knows that his audience are educators. They can handle hearing the truth.
Right.
Even if it upsets them.
Right. And who might he enlighten? Whose eyes might be opened because he had the gall to say what he's saying.
Gall or bravery or strength.
Right.
Because they're giving you this award and now you're about to say how the devastation they're causing to children. So let's just give a little caveat here.
Yes.
We don't always agree with everything that he's saying in this speech, but it is a great perspective to consider.
Right.
And
knowing that his audience is other educators and not a homeschool
parent.
It's
not a parent.
He's not talking to us as homeschool moms who need validation for homeschooling. He's talking to educators about educating children.
Yeah. Yeah. And offers so many wonderful points to consider for educators to consider.
Right.
In how they approach the school system.
And when you interpret that through our lens as homeschool moms, for sure, you can take in the important aspects of it, but some of the more strong comments are definitely not directed at us.
Yeah.
And so that's important to remember. So he breaks chapter 1 into 3 parts. So this first part is 7 things that he teaches. So he starts with, call me Mr. Gatto, please. And then he talks about 30 years ago, he became a school teacher and blah, blah, blah. And then he says, these are the things I teach. These are the things you pay me to teach. Make of them what you will. So again, just that whole tone he takes.
Yeah. So now these 7 things are things he actually teaches because he's in the traditional school system.
And I'm going to list them without talking about them first. So I'm going to list all 7. We have confusion, class position, indifference, emotional dependency, intellectual dependency, provisional self-esteem, and that one can't hide.
I feel like this is 7 different episodes right here.
Absolutely. So we're going to kind of gloss through it and maybe, not gloss, but hopefully we don't go on for too long because we actually haven't discussed all of these things. We like to do it live because if we pre-discuss, then we have an entire episode that you didn't even get to hear.
I know, yeah.
And then we miss all the good things.
And this is how we talk to each other.
So it is.
Yeah.
That's why we started this podcast.
Yeah.
So, all right. Let's see. Confusion. Is there anything that stood out to you?
Well, I love that he said everything I teach is out of context.
Yes.
I teach the unrelating of everything. I teach disconnections. And that just leads me to history, for example. You guys have heard me talk about how upset I am when I have to teach a moment in history that has nothing to do with where we are in history.
Right.
And
where you are in your independent study of history because you have some other force telling you, oh, we should teach this right now.
Yeah. And I always end up finding great value in it. Sure. And I'm glad I did it or whatever. But at the same time, when I look back on my original mission and why we're homeschooling and where I'm wanting to go with it and my vision for it, that's not what I would have chosen.
No. The discontinuity, it really stands out a lot when you look at your overall goals for educating your own children.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then you get caught up in the midst of it, which I'm sure every kind of teacher does.
Absolutely. And we all worry about those educational gaps.
Yeah.
You get really caught up in it and you have to take a step back and think about what are you really trying to achieve? Are you okay with all of this discontinuity and, the disconnected learning and arbitrariness of all of it? Mm-hmm. Or are you looking to do it differently?
Yeah. And if there is arbitrariness, I want it to be my arbitrariness.
For your reasons.
Not what some outside force is telling me, whether it's a friend or a group or a charter school or a traditional school.
State standards.
Yeah. So that, just that theme of the disconnection is, throughout, the bombardment of education of facts and, oh, you spent 3 minutes on this. Now we got to move to the next thing and the next thing because we're going to bombard you and we're not going to dive deep. And we talked about educational gaps actually in that episode of giving kids the time to go deeper into the things that they want. Right. And that's the gift of homeschooling. That's
how they connect.
Yeah. And I wish traditional school can be a really great thing and is a great opportunity depending on what kind of school district and school you have. And some of these schools do allow kids time to dive deep into things, but they have to be like a special school or
you have to find the teacher of the year for 1991 who actually believes in gifting their students the time and space and
then letting other things go. And if it shows up on the state test, oh well, they big deal, Yeah. What about for you?
I think that this one was really powerful. He says, even in the best schools, a close examination of curriculum and its sequences turns up a lack of coherence, a host of internal contradictions. Fortunately, the children have no words to define the panic and anger they feel at constant violations of natural order and sequence fobbed off on them as quality in education. And that's so true.
Yeah.
When you start disjointing everything, they do notice it, but you're just telling them that that's how it's supposed to be.
Yeah, this is the information you need to know grade. Because in 3rd grade, you're going to learn this.
Right.
And you have to know this because we're not ever circling back.
But I think that's really true because you talk about that in another context and imagine how the kids might feel panic and anger. Mm-hmm. That's how they express their like things being unnatural to them.
Have you ever read the book Screw Tape Letters by C.S. Lewis? Mm-hmm. That sentence right there totally reminded me of Screw Tape Letters, which is basically C.S. Lewis, who wrote The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe and those books, he also writes some Christian theology books.
Right.
And one of them is about like a demon working with Satan, or a higher level demon, of how to thwart the Christian faith and get someone to not believe in Jesus, right? And he talks in this way, like as if from that perspective. And I feel like Gatto, is doing the same thing. Like he must have read that book and is talking from the side of looking for the demise of the innocent. You know? And
that's the thing. He's talking to his fellow educators.
Yeah.
His coworkers, his bosses, his administrators. He's telling them this.
Yeah, I just love that he uses the word fortunately. Fortunately, the children have no words to define the panic and the anger they feel at the constant violations. You know, it's just...
he didn't use this opportunity to thank anyone or anything.
That's used the snarky.
Yeah. It's the snarkiness.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else for this confusion, number one?
No, yeah. He's just talking, you know, he mentions toolkit and, you know, and, yeah.
Okay. So number two is class position. So he talks about how kids are given numbers, they're given orders in classroom, you know, and all kinds of stuff. And it really takes away that personal connection and uniqueness to each child.
Yeah. And the numbers they're given isn't just like we have 30 kids in this class, or the numbers are their test scores,
rankings, all kinds of things, you know, from the school as a whole and individual classes. And yeah, it's really intense. And so one big thing I highlighted here was, in discussing all of these numbering, he says, I don't even know why parents would, without a fight, allow it to be done to their kids. To number and order them.
Well, the conformity. So socialization is conformity. And you know, I was just talking about something the other day that I did that. I just conformed because
just fell in line
about my kids, about a stranger telling me what to do with my kids, because that's what I was taught to do. Conform if that person's in a level of authority.
Yep.
And you don't think about it. You don't question. No. So right after that, it says, in any case, that's not my business. My job is to make them like being locked together with children who bear numbers like their own, or at least to endure it like good sports. If I do my job well, the kids can't even imagine themselves somewhere else, because I've shown them how to envy and fear the better classes and how to have contempt for the dumb classes. So when I was in 6th grade, I switched from a private traditional school to a public traditional school. And in my private school, our whole grade was just together in one class. And we moved up together and we're like a family. But in the traditional, in the public school, there was a lot more kids. They had a lot more options. And they had, so for math, I got to go to the smart math. At math, we all rotated.
Right.
So at math time, I went to the smart math class. And I knew it.
You knew it.
I knew it.
I knew it from kindergarten because I went into the early reader class. And then actually, I was put in a Spanish speaking class in kindergarten because of my last name. And then halfway throughout the day, I went over to the non-Spanish speaking classroom because I knew English. And then from there was pulled out again into an early reader group. So I learned to read at some point in kindergarten. And I knew.
Yeah.
I knew I was ahead because they made it clear that I got the advanced reading group. I knew more than the Spanish speakers. You know what I mean? And that's, why should I need to know that?
Yeah. And here's the thing. Now everyone's comparing. They know who's in the dumb class. They know who's in the smart class.
Yep.
They know who's normal or average. But what's funny about that is that is saluted or celebrated because you want to customize education. So that is our homeschool way. We want to customize education. Right. We want to go be at the level of the kids and move at the speed they can. So that's actually something really great. The motivation can be really great that they're doing that.
Right.
But in a group setting where it's more like Darwinianist, you know, it's survival of the fittest a little bit, and who's excelling, who's getting all the game on the hunt.
Right.
You know, and then that's who everyone wants to be friends with.
Right.
You know, and so it's just funny. It's hard to transfer what we value in homeschooling to a large group setting because everybody knows we're in our home. if we have to move slower, kids have no idea we're moving slower, except like, oh, I don't have to do as much work.
I mean, and then you take it further and you think about how kids, they still need to find their own natural order, right? Mm-hmm. So we give them their order based on their school ranking and their class ranking. So we do the dumb, the smart, or whatever you want to call it. And then what do they do outside of that? They don't value it the way that we do, right? Because were you really cool and popular because you were a smart kid?
Possibly.
I would go with typically not.
Unless you're like a geek. But if you're smart and you dress well and you're extroverted and maybe on a sports team
and there's other
it all works
things
together.
that they all do to create their own value system outside of
the combination.
Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah. So, all right, anything else for this one?
So I have to say that mindset with scores and grades and being a number carried through to my resume.
It does, I know.
I got a 4.0 at Azusa Pacific University in my Master's of Ed, which actually, like, in my course of study was not hard to do. Like,
sure. Yeah.
It's an adult ed program. It's done at night as extension. But what do? I put that on my resume because I know... Because he even says, I frequently insinuate the day will come when an employer will hire them on the basis of test scores and grades, even though my own experience is that employers are rightly indifferent to such things. But I knew that. I knew like showing, oh, she got a 4.0, so she's a good student.
Right. Because you've been taught that your whole life, that this matters.
The score matters.
It matters for the rest of your life. And so you presume that your employers are going to need to know that.
Yeah.
It's going to show a lot about you when actually, if you don't interview well, that has no bearing.
Right. Yeah. Right. But it just shows how we, going back to identity, we did that like a few weeks ago or whatever. And we start identifying our own selves by our GPA. Yeah. What's your GPA? What's your GPA?
Right.
What was your GPA when you graduated? I mean, how many times have we asked that question, especially close to college and high school?
Totally.
Years.
It was everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Moving on to his third thing, which is indifference. The third lesson he teaches is indifference. This one was good. You've got some stuff highlighted before me. What do you got?
So I get guilty of this in a small way, but he points out that when I'm at my best, I plan lessons very carefully in order to produce a show of enthusiasm. Mm-hmm. But when the bell rings, I insist they drop whatever it is we have been doing and proceed quickly to the next workstation. They must turn on and off like a light switch. Nothing important is ever finished in my class, nor in any class I know of. So I was guilty of doing this with my own kids in that I have stations.
Right.
But I try to make it where the stations, when they're listening to a read aloud, is equally educational and equally enriching and happy for them. Mm-hmm. And sometimes they want to stay at a station longer. So I often have to negotiate with the other kids because I'm like, well, and they're like, but I want to do it with the slime. And what I should have done is ask my kids, what do you guys want to do during the read aloud?
Right.
And here's different stations you can do. And then I can double it up or triple it up if you want to do that the whole time.
Totally.
And made it more accessible. But what I do is like, oh, well, you already had your turn at slime, so now you're going to do the watercolor, whether or not you want to. And none of that was essential. Like essentials, yes, I'm going to demand on essentials. But something that's not essential, why can't they just hang out in it, Yeah. And but one time I did this really well as a teacher. Mm-hmm. I was teaching English, and it was 7th and 8th grade, and I had them do, I've talked about it in our music and movement class or podcast or something, but I had them do an art project about one of their poems, and then I taught them art skills as well, and they spent the whole week working on their art representation of their poem.
That's so cool.
And that they were so involved. So that's literally like, with transitions and everything, about 4 hours of time total. And you could hear a pin drop in my classroom.
That's so cool.
Because they were so involved.
Yeah.
And so into getting to do art.
And so throughout their day, they still had to stop, even though they may not have naturally gotten to a stopping point. But you allowed it to go on long enough to have them feel like they completed.
Yeah, we didn't have to get in other things. We didn't, like
during your class.
During my class. So they still had to switch to another class at the end of the 50-minute period. But they still got 40 minutes and we didn't do anything else because it was like, no, they need plenty of time.
Right.
And it was awesome.
Right.
So, and that's when people are happy. You know, the happiness studies show that. Even if they don't absolutely love the activity, if it's enjoyable,
right,
they need time.
They need time to get through it in their own way. So he goes on to say that bells destroy the past and future, rendering every interval the same as any other, as the abstraction of a map renders every living mountain and river the same, even though they are not. I thought that was really interesting.
And then I underline the next sentence. Bells inoculate each undertaking with indifference.
Exactly.
They have to be able to detach immediately.
Because you can't go into math thinking about your poem and your art and be able to actually get anything out of math. Right. If that's what's next, you know?
Right.
It's a lot. Okay, so the fourth lesson he teaches is emotional dependency. So this one as a homeschool mom definitely like triggers my like, ooh, you know, like I don't want my kids to be emotionally dependent, you know, and so then it definitely made me like read really closely. And so by stars and red checks, smiles and frowns, prizes, honors and disgraces, I teach kids to surrender their will to the predestinated chain of command. Don't like that.
Yeah, and then that next part. Right. Because rights do not exist inside a school, not even the right of free speech, as the Supreme Court has ruled. Right. Unless school authorities say they do.
And it's so true. It's so true. And I remember hearing kids say, don't I have freedom of speech? You know, and you hear about it still across campuses. And on some level, you think, well, yes, of course. But then, you know, as parents of kids who could be there, well, actually, that's something I want to talk about. So I don't really want that conversation happening at the school between a bunch of kids without the right authority leading the conversation. So it's this double-ended sword of, you know, like or double-edged sword. I get why schools can't always allow freedom of speech, but because that's something that's important to me in my own home, I keep my kids there. You know, so that my kids do have freedom of speech, you know, and well,
actually they have freedom of speech if it's within the agenda of the traditional school.
Right, if it fits.
Yeah. If it doesn't fit, then now you can't talk about it. Right. But if I knew even, you know, 25 years ago when I was in high school, evolution was the way. Right. And so I knew not to talk about my own faith and beliefs. But the person next to me, if their faith and beliefs was in, you know, evolution, they had every freedom to talk about
whatever they wanted. Yeah.
But I had to be closeted.
Right. Yep. You have a good one.
Individuality is constantly trying to assert itself among children and teenagers. So my judgments come thick and fast. So he's again being snarky. Individuality is a contradiction of class theory, a curse to all systems of classification. That sounds like something like Hitler would say.
Right. There's another one later in this chapter that I'm like, ugh.
Yeah, it's just shocking when you think about it, and we don't realize that this is the teachers all have great intentions, right? But we've been taught over 150 years or more to conform, right? And then I'm always mad at myself when I do, because I will take on that personality of conformity way more than I want to. Right. Without even thinking about it.
Well, it's very anti-conflict.
Yeah.
When you're expected to conform, it becomes a conflict not to.
Yeah, well, and I remember when my students would ask me question after question, I would get annoyed.
Right. Like, just take what I say and move on.
Yeah, that's the answer. Like, we don't need to have a discussion about it. Right. And I still say that to my kids. Like, this is not it. We don't need to have a discussion about it. That is what it is. And it's like, why can't we have a discussion about it?
Because it's exhausting. No, but really.
But even as moms, we do this too, and dads and siblings do it. We're just like, that's the answer. And we can't handle individual curiosity even,
right?
You know.
So he goes on to talk about how he sees individuality show up while he's teaching. He says children sneak away for a private moment in the toilet, or they steal a private instant in the hallway on the grounds that they need water.
Well, yeah, I remember my students would ask to go get water. I would give them the hall pass.
They just seem to be alone,
and they would just walk. And then they would, oh, maybe I'll get a drink of water. And then they, and then if they got caught, they'd be like, go back to class. What are you doing?
Right. I know. So he says, he knows that they don't need those things necessarily, but I allow them to, and he puts this in quotations, deceive me because this conditions them to depend on my favors.
Mm-hmm. And how many, when I was in school, how many teachers did you have that you knew certain kids got away with more with them because they trusted them more or knew them more, or
totally.
And then some people didn't have any freedom, you know?
Right. Totally. I know. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yep. All right. Let's move on to the 5th lesson, which is intellectual dependency.
And remember, he's saying this to teachers. Yes. That's what's getting me on this. Like,
right.
Yeah.
Good students wait for a teacher to tell them what to do. This is the most important lesson of them all. We must wait for other people, better trained than ourselves, to make the meanings of our lives. And I put here, I am still unlearning this.
Yeah.
And this goes to the example that you were talking about earlier, which was something that happened yesterday. You didn't think to question something because you took it as the authority. Oh, these people must know better.
Yeah.
This is going to come out better because they already have this vision, even though there's a flag going off in my head saying, this doesn't seem right.
Yeah.
But you didn't speak up because that whole
I've been taught to conform for decades. Yes. And here's the thing though. Oh, did you?
No, go ahead.
There is merit in course of study. There is merit in someone saying, no, this is how we do things. Just wait and see. We're going to do something awesome with this, or this is something you need to know.
Give me a chance to get there for you.
Yeah, and or this is something you have to know. Like if it's engineering, like you have to learn from the expert. You have to wait for a teacher to tell you these are the things you need to learn, because you wouldn't know. You haven't been in industry.
And then that's the thing. What is that relevant to? The industry. Right? And we're not teaching kids industry in 5th grade, I hope.
Exactly. Yeah, that's for college. Like he talks about it, right?
Yeah.
Like eventually, like they should get to choose, right?
Yeah.
What they're studying, but that's what college is supposed to be for. You're supposed to get to college and by that time say, I'm so interested in psychology. But now that's not become college. Now that's become the master's degrees.
Right.
Now things you're passionate about is the master's degree.
Right.
It can't happen in college because you still have to take 2 years of liberal arts and you still have to take all your prerequisites and all these things to be a well-rounded, quote, well-rounded individual. So you can't focus on anything. Where the European model, we always look down on that growing up because you get pigeonholed into something early.
Right.
But there's got to be a good marrying of the two. Yeah.
Let's see. He says, successful children do the thinking I assigned them with a minimum of resistance and a decent show of enthusiasm.
Mm-hmm.
And then...
and that's where he talks about curiosity.
Right. And he finishes that by saying, curiosity has no important place in my work, only conformity.
Mm-hmm.
And so knowing his tone and knowing who he's speaking to, it just hits you.
Yeah.
You're like, yeah. And having gone through government schooling, you know, like...
And doing that to my own kids. Like, I'm not innocent of doing this either. And because that is who we all are now. Yeah. So I think just as a parent and as a homeschool parent, these are things for us to keep in mind as we teach our kids to unlearn or unschool ourselves. That's what
deschooling,
That's what deschooling's about.
And it's why it's really necessary for those of us who have gone through it, or just culturally in general, because we're all a product of that, whether we were homeschooled or not. Like, you know, even in media, you see that, you know, and so there is so much deschooling that really is important, but I don't know if there's any way to to condition it out of you fully until you experience each thing that comes up.
Well, it's a totally change of concept and, it's a change of dialogue inside your brain and your heart. You know?
When we encounter a homeschool fail, that's when we go, oh, that's where I haven't deschooled fully, you know, and now hopefully I can go forward and not do that thing again because I'm aware of it now. I didn't realize I hadn't deschooled myself from that particular thing.
But here's the problem though. The system is still set up to, and it doesn't happen for everyone, you know, there are outliers, but the system is set up where you do need to do certain things. You do need to conform in certain ways in order to hit the industry. Just to, you know, if you want a career in something you're passionate about, there are hoops you still have to jump through. There is conformity, and there is merit in your elders teaching you. So it's just finding that balance, right? Of being humble about knowing that you don't know everything.
Right.
And then also taking control of your education and saying, actually, I do want to learn from this elder because I do want to be really good at whatever it is. Like I am going to listen to the guitar teacher, the ukulele teacher, the music teacher, because they do know. And I thirst to know what they know.
Exactly.
You know?
Yep. Anything else there? He goes on to say on the last part of this, good people wait for an expert to tell them what to do. Mm-hmm. And that kills me because that's definitely me sometimes. Like I wait for someone to give me their guidance because that's what I've been trained to do since I was 0 years old in daycare. You know, like I'm waiting for the expert, the authority to tell me what to do next rather than just always taking it on. And I've gotten better at it, of course. I wouldn't be good at what I do if I didn't finally figure it out and, you know, be comfortable becoming an expert of sorts in my own trade.
Yeah.
But it's still so tough, you know? I don't know.
I guess it's finding value in the way, like picking to spend your time in a way that's valuable to you and having the autonomy to do that. And I think some schools are really, like even in college when I needed to write a paper, it was so nice when a professor said there's no right answer.
Right.
There's no wrong answer. Write your opinion on it and just support it.
Yeah.
And those are the little ways you can give autonomy to people in their education and let them pursue curiosity. But one more thing about that. The very last sentence of that, of number 5 is, we've built a way of life that depends on people doing what they are told because they don't know how to tell themselves what to do. It's one of the biggest lessons I teach. And so the CEOs of the world and the entrepreneurs of the world don't do that.
Nope.
They don't wait for people to tell them what to do. They do come up on their own and say, hey, let's try this. They aren't afraid of being outside the box. But the majority do. They do wait to be told. And I experienced that in my different jobs and different volunteer work.
And I remember that being a frustrating thing. Like, why are they waiting? Can they just take the initiative?
Takes initiative is what I had to put on my resume.
Right.
Takes initiative. I will, you know what? When I was an admin assistant, that drawer, that is such a bad organization of the pins and the note cards and the binder clips. I'm going to take the initiative, spend like $20 on organizing materials and make it useful. And I had to call that initiative.
Right.
But
that's the thing.
That should be a normal thing. You see something,
you just do it,
and you just do it. You don't have to be told to do it.
That is your job. And I think it's not a special thing that you do.
Yeah,
that is your job.
And the managers of the world today are probably really frustrated with people because people are waiting to quote unquote take initiative.
Right. And there might, you know, we're kind of between generations here, right? So, you know, we're the generation we belong to, and now there's a whole new generation or two of young adults in the workforce that we don't even have experience working with at this moment in time. Our husbands do, and so it's actually would be
I actually hear about it.
Yeah. So I hear stories through them, and then the generation that our children are is also different. So I don't know, maybe things have changed, and this book was written in 92 and published. So just to throw that out there, it could be different. School could have started to change over time.
Well, and you hear about that. Like, that's what I love about Mr. DeMeo, for example. The blended learning approach. Like,
there are amazing
teachers are looking to get outside of conformity and looking to give people freedom. And they're doing it through technology because that's, like, if you give everyone a computer, they can research and dive into topics they're interested in. And I love that idea. And that those are the extraordinary teachers that are getting Teacher of the Year.
Right. So right before he finishes that, he says, don't be too quick to vote for radical school reform if you want to continue getting a paycheck. Mm-hmm. So he's talking to his fellow educators, like, this does seem crazy, but if you vote for it, what are we going to be doing?
Yeah. Well, that's what happened in California when COVID hit and parents didn't want to do virtual schooling. They wanted to do homeschooling. So they pulled their kids out of the virtual schooling and they tried to put them in charter schools who were providing funds for them to pick out their own curriculum, secular based, their own curriculum. And what did California do?
Nope.
We can't have you do that because people are going to lose their jobs. We can't have you do what is best for your kids because people will lose their jobs. And over here at the charter school, I'm on the board.
Right.
We're like, no, the teachers will follow the students. If we get, we had 5,000 students
trying to get
into our independent study homeschool charter school.
Publicly funded.
Yeah. We had 5,000 students and we had to turn them all away because California said, actually, we don't want the money to follow the student on where they want to go. No. We don't want them to have school choice. We want them to stay at the school that the parents felt was detrimental because it was virtual schooling. But here's the thing, those teachers, if we had 5,000 new students, we would have needed a teacher for we had a 19-to-1 ratio at the time. We would have needed a teacher for every 19 students that came over. Think of how many jobs that is.
Yep.
That would have, so it's just really frustrating and maddening to me that the school reform that could have happened in that moment and the choice that could have happened in that moment didn't, because
such a lost opportunity,
because of the control that the government needed to make sure teachers had the job that they had and couldn't migrate.
And they implemented on an emergency order.
Yeah, and that's the thing though. The educators should be willing to be educated on a new model, on a new way. And I think a lot of them would have loved this new opportunity. They would have loved the ability to move to a charter school and been able to work with families now of all different grade levels. What a cool opportunity.
Yep.
Anyway, so don't get me started, but you already did.
I know.
Gatto, you got me started.
That's the thing, right? So even though he's not talking to us, we feel so passionately about these things because we feel passionately about education in general. Just because we choose homeschool for our family doesn't mean we don't care about what's happening elsewhere. We do deeply, but I'm not going to be a part of that and waiting for it to change at the detriment of my children.
Right, yeah.
So anyway.
And most people, the only choice they have is the traditional school. And how frustrating for them that the school can't evolve and grow and be educated.
Their children.
Yeah.
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 All right. The 6th lesson he teaches is provisional self-esteem. So I didn't highlight too much in this one.
I love this one.
You had some good ones.
Okay. I want to talk about the monthly report, which back then was monthly, but now I've seen on social media, kids come home with a weekly or daily report of their behavior. So he says a monthly report, impressive in its provision, is sent into a student's home to elicit approval or mark exactly down to a single percentage point how dissatisfied with the child a parent should be. Yeah. The ecology of good schooling depends on perpetuating dissatisfaction, just as the commercial economy depends on the same fertilizer.
I feel like I couldn't even touch that one because I felt so much.
Yeah.
That I was like, I don't even know. I would just highlight this whole thing.
Yeah. So. I mean, that's the thing. Like when I see, it seems like such a great idea because it's involving the parent. It's letting the parent know. Right. And, teachers are working overtime through the summer, hours outside of their job requirements to make sure parents can be part of their child's education because they know how important it is.
Right.
But when you do that in a way that's evaluating the child of how their attitude was or whatever, or if they were satisfactory or dissatisfactory or needs improvement, it's like, it's just such a odd way to involve the parent. And now you have, you're basically like terrorizing the home, if I dare say it like that. Like you're now entering their home life.
Right.
And you are now getting a say on how that parent now interacts with their child when they get home from school.
Yeah.
Daily, weekly, or monthly. And it's just a weird thing that I don't know, like the intentions are there, the good intentions are there, but now again, we're just critiquing the child. Yeah. My child doesn't know unless they overhear me talking with my spouse. Oh my goodness, they were torturous today. You know, they might overhear me saying that, or like, oh, we had such a hard day today, you know, but I'm the parent. Mm-hmm. I'm not a stranger that's evaluating them in this synthetic environment with synthetic or arbitrary segregation and commenting on a child that you don't know. You don't know their home culture. You don't know anything about them, and you are evaluating them.
Exactly.
So yeah, and then he mentioned self-evaluation. So that would be the ultimate, right? If someone can say, "Oh, I got that wrong. I want to fix it."
Right, and then. You know, he says self-evaluation, the staple of every major philosophical system that ever appeared on the planet, is never considered a factor.
Right.
And that's so true. I think of all my jobs, my annual report or my annual evaluation always had a self-evaluation.
Oh, totally.
And I was so lost because I've never had to self-evaluate before. And I was like,
well, I'm just going to,
what do you think of me?
I've seen self-evaluation.
Like, do you like me?
Yeah. Yeah. I've seen self-evaluations, though, where someone can either give themselves all really low scores because they're really humble.
Right.
And then self-evaluation where they give themselves all high scores because they did the task that they needed to do. Right. And neither one of those are good.
No.
Like because we don't know how to evaluate what we're doing.
No. Exactly.
And it's hard to admit when we're not doing a good job.
And he finishes here with, people need to be told what they are worth. Yeah. And that's snark.
Yeah.
You know, and that's crazy.
But we do that, when you think about it, we do that to our own, well, I do that to my own spouse.
I think we have a need for validation, which mostly stems from the fact that we've always been told where we fall, where we are, how we're doing. And so we need it to keep going. But as adults, especially when you're not at a work environment, you don't get told that on a regular basis. So now we need it, which is so weird. When really I could self-evaluate and say, hey, are my kids healthy? Is my house, in good order? Mm-hmm. Then I think I'm hitting the marks that I need to be hitting.
Yeah, and you're not as dependent. So there's a dependency again, you know, like
exactly.
If you have provisional self-esteem, then you're dependent on, you have emotional dependence on other people. And I have to work really hard on that because I love encouragement.
Of course.
And, but why do I need it?
Why?
And sometimes the places that I don't need it, I then am able to look at it as like a gift for them. Like I'm able to say, oh, that's so cool you feel that way. Like I love that.
We know that words of affirmation are a real thing. And I'm not saying we shouldn't want them or we shouldn't value those. But the constant need for it that I feel like might be more prevalent these days than may have been in the past.
Yeah. Especially
intense.
Yeah. Well, that's what they say about millennials, right? They say you have to be coddling them and whatever, and which isn't necessarily true, but yeah, I feel like not being able to trust yourself and your own evaluation of things is hard. And I'm always looking for input because I'm not sure. And then when I get it, I do this to you. I get it, and I'm like, oh.
Right. Well, that's not how I actually feel.
That doesn't fit with what I needed you to say, and now I don't know how to deal with it.
Right. Because you could have just done what you wanted and been fine.
Yeah, and because that's foreign, we need the provisional.
Right. We're not comfortable with the complete autonomy.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's interesting. Okay. The 7th lesson is that one can't hide. Class change lasts exactly 300 seconds to keep promiscuous fraternization at low levels. Students are encouraged to tattle on each other or even to tattle on their parents.
Like the hall monitor.
This comes back to the whole Hitler idea.
Oh, yeah.
Training the Nazi youth to tattle on their parents, to report that. That is terrifying to me. And it's so true.
And there's no time to build friendships. Like, even, I remember lunchtime, if you need to talk to a teacher, you had to choose between getting an answer to your question or eating your lunch.
I know.
I mean, that's insane.
You didn't even have time for anything else.
Yeah.
Or you would risk not eating.
Yeah. And then, and then if you didn't get out fast enough, if you had to go to the bathroom, now you're not going to get in the right line, or you're not going to get to sit next to your friends at lunch. You know, it's just the minimal amount of freedom that there is. What's that one called? One can't hide. The freedom to do what you want to do, including having your own. Imagine the introverts. See, I was an extrovert, so I didn't have as much problem, but the introverts, I can't even imagine the torture they went through on a daily basis, because
no space.
Traditional school is definitely meant for the extrovert. The speaking up, the raising your hand, appeals
and the
to
not
the teachers.
Shy. I was an extrovert, so being around people all the time wasn't the problem, but I was shy. Mm-hmm. So then I wouldn't speak up. I wouldn't speak up for myself. I wouldn't speak up in class unless I knew I had the right answer and would get praised for it.
Right.
You know what I mean? But otherwise, I wasn't going to ask a question that I thought was dumb. Like, I'd never put myself out there. Yeah. But I was an extrovert, so I felt comfortable with the other people.
Right.
I was just shy.
Yeah.
Anything else to say about number 7, one can't hide?
So, kind of alluding to what I was talking about earlier about like terrorizing the home. What I meant was like an intrusion. Yeah. You know, and he writes this. He says, I assign a type of extended schooling called homework, so that the effective surveillance, if not the surveillance itself, travels into private households where students might otherwise use free time to learn something unauthorized from a father or mother by exploration or by apprenticing to some wise person in the neighborhood. And so it's just showing that even homework is intruding, you know, that it's breaking in, you know, the school is now breaking into people's homes, like I mentioned earlier. And this is really what I was talking about, because, and we've talked about this before, you just had my kid for 8 hours. What else do you need with them?
Right. Now you're taking on our whole afternoon and evening, and they're stressed out to try and balance time with their family, activities, and then, you know, all of the homework weighing over them. You know?
That was one of the reasons homeschooling was solidified for me, because all those years I was in St. Louis for 5 years without even having any kid. And then the 6th year I had a baby, you know. But for 5 years, I listened to these parents just say my entire relationship with my coworkers.
Older children,
my entire relationship, kindergarten, 1st grade. They get home from school and now they have to force them to do homework. Oh. They had these homework packets, almost like the virtual schooling of COVID times. But they had these homework packets that they had to get through by a certain date. And their relationship ended up becoming, like, I remember my friend had a 5th grader, all about making sure the math homework got done. And they would spend like 2 hours after dinner with tears and everything. And then he had to go to bed. Oh. And that was her relationship.
What kind of relationship is that?
Yeah, what kind of family time is that? You're not enjoying a game together. You're not relaxing together.
You're not building character. No. You're not building into their hearts for their futures. Like, when are they going to need to sit there and do math for 2 hours?
Yeah.
When they're raising their kids, well, and they have to do it?
Their child is probably trying to express their fatigue.
Right.
And then also their individuality. Like earlier in the chapter when he talked about individuality, it's like sometimes it doesn't always show the way that we want individuality to show, like with their cute clothes or whatever. Sometimes it shows by feeling like, oh, they're rebelling or they're being disobedient. And it could just be that they want their own voice and they want time to express it and learn things they want to learn.
Right.
So, yeah.
Anything else you wanted to say?
No.
Okay. So this goes into part 2, and I can't quite tell, and I haven't researched it on the side yet, and I will for the future chapters, but I can't quite tell if part 2 is still part of his speech. So this is chapter 1, section 2. Oh. And so I don't know if this is still part of his speech or not, which if it is, it's very interesting that he's now trying to educate. So the snark goes away a little bit. And in section 2, he's really trying to give a brief history of compulsory government schooling.
Yeah.
So he talks about kind of where it came from and in the United States specifically.
Well, can I first just say, maybe it does continue, because he wouldn't end a speech with children will follow a private drummer if you can't get them into a uniform marching band.
That's true. I agree, which is why I believe he's still going. Mm-hmm. But it's very hard interesting. To tell. Yeah, because he definitely goes into a different kind of topic area. So he begins to talk about compulsory schooling and mass schooling. And then he talks about originality and variety were common currency before this. Our freedom from regimentation made us the miracle of the world, talking about the U.S., like our entrepreneurial abilities and the abilities to be different and non-conformist were actually what made the United States
the great different. Experiment.
Exactly. Yeah. And then look what's happened over the years.
Well, yeah, Hamilton alone, you see that. Like
totally.
He's
the musical,
an immigrant and he comes from nothing, no family to represent him, and here Hamilton is making a huge impact.
Right, and he was saying social class boundaries were relatively easy to cross, and it's just very interesting because that was the case, and now it does seem harder because most people just kind of stay where they are. That's the assumption, like I'm going to be that worker bee, that's what I'm being trained in and out, in and out each day.
He talks about how people learn to read and write, even the people who were enslaved, right? They learned to read and write, which is amazing.
Yeah. I read this years ago, and this was actually not this book, but about how the literacy rate was actually a lot higher than we are led to believe. We're led to believe that mandatory schooling is actually what has improved the literacy rate, but that's not true. And it was fascinating to me, and that was one of the big things that helped me calm down about reading curriculum for my kid, because I was like, wait a minute. All these people learned to read, and the common denominator was that they wanted to. Yeah. And if you want to do it, you're going to learn how, even if you teach yourself. And so that was just really fascinating for me to read through. And so,
that's what
he talks
says.
about that.
Trick is to wait until someone asks and then move fast while the mood is on.
Exactly.
I mean, that's encouraging, like you were just saying, for all of us who may have a struggling reader, not because they have a special need or some kind of barrier, but just because they're struggling because they don't want to.
Right. Let's see. Anything else that you wanted to point out in section 2?
Okay, so we've talked about this, I think, also in Homegrown, that this is what he says: school takes our children away from any possibility of an active role in community life. And Homegrown, our book club from last fall, says the same thing. Right. It destroys communities by relegating the training of children to the hands of certified experts, and by doing so, it ensures our children cannot grow up fully human. Aristotle taught that without a fully active role in community life, one could not hope to become a healthy human being. And like we said, like with the homework and all that stuff, there's no time. And now even volunteer hours have become a number. Our child is now numbered by their volunteer hours. You need 100 hours of volunteer work for your college application or whatever it is these days. So, yeah. And I just want to reiterate too, it's not like we know all, this is just kind of opening this book is continually our minds are continually getting opened by books and some suspicions we might have or some leanings we might have are getting confirmed.
Yeah, there's some confirmation bias. Yeah, right. For sure, because we already leaned in this direction, but just hearing it from an actual educator.
Yeah. We are all actual educators.
No, yeah. But
hearing it from someone who was in it.
Schooling educator.
Yeah, for 30 years. And
it's not insignificant.
Was chosen. Who chooses the teacher of the year? Is it the
state?
Yeah, but is it the
state education board, or are you nominated? I don't know.
Yeah. So we should look that up for our next episode, because it would be interesting to see, because if he got teacher of the year multiple times, obviously people thought he had something to offer. Right. And so it's neat hearing from him. Yep. But yeah, I just want to say, it's not like we know all this stuff. No. Like the book is really helpful, and reading these books as homeschool moms and dads, really help you find your way.
Totally. He ends the section 2. He starts talking about just how far back conformity goes and what society's tried doing, all of this conformity education, and it's very interesting. So he ends by saying, schools teach exactly what they are intended to teach, and they do it well, which is how to be a good Egyptian and remain in your place in the pyramid. Yeah. So that's just a reference to, he's talking about the Egyptian culture and
the caste system.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. So then section 3 is about the impossible task of changing government schooling. So, he just talks about how it's not inevitable. It's not impossible to overthrow. We have choices, but what really it comes down to is people being brave enough to say no to that.
Yeah.
And choose something alternative, which is really hard because you have to deschool yourself enough to separate from that system and then be able to find a way to make a different educational style work, whether it's homeschooling or, the Waldorf and Montessori school styles, but to break out from compulsory mass government schooling, is a very difficult thing.
And if you're a single income,
right,
or a single parent family,
right,
or you need both incomes, that's really hard to do. You barely have time to get dinner on the table,
right?
And then to research that and try and figure that out. You want to hear from a friend. Where do your kids go to school?
Right.
I'm going to try and go there too.
And when you live somewhere where, they make school choice a very difficult thing, it becomes really obvious that I'm using air quotes here, they want you in government schooling. And it feels weird when you start to think about it that way. You're being forced into this system because they're making it nearly impossible. So if you can homeschool, then it doesn't feel quite so blatant. But if you don't have very many other options, you can't afford private school, Waldorf or Montessori schools, and you can't homeschool your kids for whatever reason, you're stuck.
Yeah.
You're stuck.
Well, and what's funny is in some states, they do let the money, if you don't put your kid in a public school, they will give you like a stipend. And I think when I was in St. Louis, it was like a $4,000 stipend per year. And then people could send their kids to private school if they wanted to, or whatever choice.
There's an opt-out clause.
Yeah. And I don't know if you got it if you homeschooled or not, but at least these people could make choices that way.
Yeah, without completely alienating yourself and saying, I am anti this,
But that was 10 years, 15 years ago. I don't know what it is
and
now.
then just recently, if we're going to, talk some current events here, France just outlawed homeschooling altogether. Yeah. No exemptions. That's really scary.
It is.
It's really scary to me that there's no alternatives, no options.
Well, now, Germany was already outlawed a while ago. And if you want people to not follow the masses, especially when they find a lot of times when people follow the masses, you end up with, you end up with Hitler Youth. That's what you end up with. I hate to say it, but
mob mentality, and you start accepting. And here's the thing: I just read a book recently. I finished my summer reading.
Yes, I haven't even started.
I finished my biography about Franklin Roosevelt.
Good job.
And it was really fascinating because it's just such a reminder that these things didn't start off so obvious and in your face. It's scary because it starts slowly and you accept one thing after another, and then you all of a sudden realize you have your kids in Hitler Youth.
Yeah.
But you didn't mean to sign up for that.
Yeah.
You would have never picked that if that had been outlined to you from the beginning.
Yeah.
And so
the chipping away at our values little by little, you don't notice.
Exactly. And I think ultimately that's kind of how I feel about this particular book. He's not talking to us homeschool parents specifically. We're just getting the benefit of reading his work, his speeches, his essays as a collection for dumbing us down. And it's fascinating because he's calling it all out. And if you see this as a whole based on how he's presenting it, why would you ever sign your kid up for those 7 things that he teaches?
Yeah.
You wouldn't.
And and I love it because he's being touted as the best teacher of New York in those years. And he says, let me tell you what I'm teaching.
Right. You're giving me an award for this.
Yeah.
Which really, we know at the end of the day, he might be doing some of those things because that's what he has to do in order to have his job. But he also talks about how he does it differently. Yeah. So I presume he's made real connections with his students and he's helped, what did he call it? Guerrilla warfare, basically, his guerrilla tactics in the classroom because he's trying to find ways around these things. But at the end of the day, there's so much of it that he just can't. Because
and a lot, and I feel like without any statistics, I feel like most teachers are trying to do that.
Sure.
because they
went
into the field to educate, and they don't even know all the ways that they're conforming. But those who are aware are definitely trying to find their way around it. Their hearts are there to show. I mean, my friends are teachers. I was one,
absolutely.
So it's like the hearts are there, and it is the only glimpse sometimes of structure and love and life at these schools.
Absolutely.
But what we're saying, what Gatto is saying is there's a better way. We don't have to be stuck to 1852 or whatever. Let's evolve, let's move on. And that's what he's kind of fighting against.
Right.
Is the Industrial Revolution. And
I agree. And he still continues some of the historical information in part 3 of this first chapter. He talks about compulsory schooling coming from the perspective of some leaders in states wanting the immigrant children to learn one way and to learn one thing, because they didn't want the influence of other cultures and religions really taking over or allowing people all this choice. So then you hear how compulsory schooling even got its origins back then.
Right.
And so even though the lens was different in what they were trying to get people to conform to.
But still conformity. Why are we always asking for conformity? Why is that the underlying goal?
Because then that's how your leadership in your state will look.
Yeah.
If you have people growing up this way, then they're going to vote this way and they're going to do this. Individuality can be very dangerous.
Yeah.
But anyway.
That's what starts the American experiment.
Mm-hmm. Okay. You have some more in section 3.
I
just felt it was very historical here, and he talks about... I just want to make sure you get to say anything that you want to say before.
Yeah, he talks about how this training that happens is the original purpose was to regulate the poor and things that people probably aren't aware of and didn't realize. And
right, it's not just a product of the Industrial Revolution. It also has its roots in leadership of the states and at the time, some of them were still colonies or whatever, when some of the original compulsory schools started in Massachusetts, and they didn't want the influence from the immigrant families.
Yeah,
and it's
crazy.
Insane.
Yeah,
it's crazy. He talks about Socrates here, and he says, "Is it any wonder Socrates was outraged at the accusation he took money to teach?"
Oh yeah.
And I find that so fascinating, because why would I get paid to teach someone? Like, that's what I should be doing. We should all just be doing
apprenticeship.
That. Right.
Well, it was really hard for me to actually find a place when I was doing my counseling credential. I had to get in a certain number of hours. And the school districts did not want me because they didn't have enough counselors to mentor me, because you had to be you had to find your place in a school district. And I was interviewing at school districts, applying, and fortunately someone took me. But it's like, why is that not a thing? Why is that not a natural thing, that there's always someone for free? I was there for free. It wasn't like I was asking to be paid.
But they just needed you to be a counselor already. Yeah. They didn't have time to train you.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's crazy. Mm-hmm. Anything else you want to share there?
No.
I have more. Let's see. Oh, he says here, it is time that we squarely face the fact that institutional school teaching is destructive to children. Nobody survives the 7-lesson curriculum completely unscathed, not even the instructors. The method is deeply and profoundly anti-educational. No tinkering will fix it. And one of the great ironies of human affairs, the massive rethinking the schools require would cost so much less than we are spending now that powerful interests cannot afford to let it happen.
Yeah, I think we actually just talked about it with our charter school.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we had another offline conversation about that.
Yeah, but it's literally, our charter school is giving us money to buy curriculum. Mm-hmm. And there are a number of, they're not giving it. They're
No. Yeah.
They're buying, procuring it.
Yeah.
There's a process, but here's the thing. A lot of people don't even spend their full budget.
No.
They don't need the full budget.
And it's only a portion of what the government actually sets aside per student. And so we're not even utilizing,
And we don't need that. Those
and we don't even need it. Yeah. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, here's your line here. That is the iron law of institutional schooling. It is a business subject neither to normal accounting procedures nor to the rational scalpel of competition. Mm-hmm. There's no competition in the government schooling.
They don't want it.
So and they don't want it. They don't allow for it.
That's why they're trying to get rid of charter schools, because charter schools are government schooling.
Right.
So we're talking about all this, but we're part of a government charter school.
Totally.
But that is the competition for the traditional schools. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And the problem is the traditional school union or whatever it is aren't happy with the charter. And so California is trying to get rid of these charter schools. And it's just really sad. And it's done under the guise of
improving the
accounting. Mm-hmm. Oh no, it's and that like we're not accountable. We don't have good accounting and that, or test scores and things like that. And it's like everything you just said about the charter school can be said also about the traditional school. And so if you applied the same measuring stick, and that's why we love the book by Thomas Sowell.
Right.
What is it called again?
Charter schools
and their enemies. We haven't even talked about that. But I mean, that constantly is coming to me there too, because it really shows they can't run school like a business because they can't handle the competition.
No, and they won't allow for a free market.
Yeah.
That's kind of the whole premise of what made our country successful to begin with, was a free market economy. And so he goes on to say, he's trying to describe a free market in schooling like the country had until the Civil War, one in which students volunteer for the kind of education that suits them, even if it means self-education. Mm-hmm. 100% agree with that.
And then he mentions your guy.
Him? My guy?
Yeah.
Ben Franklin?
Didn't you just read his biography?
No, FDR, Roosevelt.
I thought you said Ben Franklin.
I don't think I did.
Oh, okay.
Franklin Roosevelt is what I thought I said.
Yeah.
But it also didn't hurt Ben Franklin, is what it says here in the book.
That's true. Yeah.
That he can see. Okay. And I love this at the bottom of this page, 17. He says, all the pathologies we've considered come about in large measure because the lessons of school prevent children from keeping important appointments with themselves and with their families to learn lessons in. And I would say everything I'm about to point out here is exactly what I'm trying to teach my kids.
Yeah.
It's exactly my point in homeschooling.
Yeah.
These things are self-motivation, perseverance, self-reliance, courage, dignity, and love, and lessons in service to others too, which are among the key lessons of home and community life. Mm-hmm. Done. Drop the mic.
Yeah.
That's what I want. But these compulsory government schools don't allow time for that.
Yeah.
There's no time.
Yeah. So how could they do that differently? You hear these other models. I would love for more. I would love for the charter school to be more experimental.
Totally.
And do okay, you can drop your kids off here, and we're gonna offer 2 hours of uninterrupted whatever they want to do with things available to them, books, and and just see how
there's a model of schooling that is like that, where they do kind of like the one-room schoolroom, but they let the kids self-direct their education, and there are educators present that can guide them and help them find what they're interested in. And I don't remember.
And the East Coast.
Yeah. We were. Maybe Homegrown.
Homegrown told us about that.
It, and I've read about it elsewhere, and it's fascinating. We have one down here in San Diego, but it's a private institution, which is extremely expensive. Mm-hmm. But it sounds fascinating. Like if I could pay for that, and I needed that situation for my kids or my family, that's a great opportunity to send my kids somewhere where they can kind of self-direct under the guise of other mentor educators, who can look out for them if I needed that.
Yeah, and can school districts please look at those schools and say, hey, because we acknowledge we need a place for our kids to go.
Right.
Like, not our specific kids, but others. Others need, and people do want certain benefits that those traditional schools provide. They don't actually want the tradition. Parents don't actually care if their kid spends 20 minutes on math or 2 hours in the classroom. They just want their children to be educated. So if schools can take that responsibility that has been assigned to them from these parents, they're giving their children over to you for this amount of time. why not just go try these other, look at the experiments already being done.
Right.
And offer more of that.
There's no competition.
Yeah.
They won't allow for competitive analysis in their version of schooling.
So can I read the last sentence of the chapter?
You read it.
Because this is how I think he finished his speech, right?
I'm guessing this is the end of his speech. So I think he did all 3 parts in his speech here.
So, school is a 12-year jail sentence where bad habits are the only curriculum truly learned. I teach school and win awards doing it. I should know.
Ouch.
I can't imagine being those administrators and teachers in there.
Oh, do you clap for that?
Yeah, what happened?
I need a video. Know. I need a video recording. If I find one, I will share it.
Yeah, let's link it.
But now I have so much research to do. So
I bet we could look it up on YouTube.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I love this book. I just love what it makes me think through and then what it reminds me of to hold fast. What are my values in teaching my children? And not just that, because you've heard us on the podcast, we waver and go, well, it's not so bad. But the thing is really the teachers aren't so bad.
Right.
The model of schooling is bad.
Yeah. And the heart of the teachers, most of the teachers are in the right place.
Right.
And I mean,
until you read charter schools and their enemies, then you hear about a lot of teachers.
No, you do. Yeah.
And that's its
own
But
for the most part,
no,
at least the people I know firsthand and then the people they know.
Right.
And, and the private school is a traditional model as well. Like a lot of private schools, they follow, it's no different. They just offer Bible as well.
Totally.
And so, but you have to pay for that choice. And so it'd just be nice if there could be different models all around.
Right.
And then you could truly see what's working. And then maybe all of it works.
Right. Offer the choice to the people it works for.
People know their children can find a fit.
Right. I agree. So that wraps up chapter 1.
Yeah.
No big deal. And then we decided that we're going to just do one chapter at a time because there's only 5 chapters and a prologue. But chapter 2 will be our next month's book club podcast, and it's called The Psychopathic School. And it's another speech of his.
Yeah. I love being provoked in my brain about things like this because it's so contrary to what I always believed growing up and so contrary to what so many people still believe now.
Right.
So it's really neat to hear this other perspective.
Totally. All right. Well, that wraps up the preface in chapter 1.
But there was a lot to dive into there too.
Was.
Yeah. Maybe other chapters won't.
We'll see.
Have as much. Who knows?
And maybe it'll be a nice short 30-minute podcast for you next time. Maybe. All right. So now it's time for our next segment, the Coop Q&A, where we answer your questions. If you have a question, you can ask us by contacting us on our podcast page at our website, thecoophomeschool.com, or you can email us, mamahens@thecoophomeschool.com. Today's question: how do I get a teacher ID?
Ooh.
So there's 3 ways, plus a 4th that I would presume is true, but I didn't actually research. It came to me while we were filming the rest of our podcast.
Oh.
So one is, if you're like us and you are a part of a public charter homeschool, you can get one through your public charter school, most likely. So we can pay $5.
Yeah, and then you can take a really cute picture, like a school picture.
It's my favorite.
Yeah.
And then it'll say your charter school's name on it, and it'll say teacher. So then you can use it for discounts. Barnes and Noble, lots of places give teacher discounts.
I think like Office Depot or Staples. Sometimes they have like a month that or a week or something that teachers can go
more
and
or
get.
something.
Yeah, 25% off.
I mean, SeaWorld.
Oh, SeaWorld well, who knows what it's going to be with COVID? But SeaWorld used to be is teachers got in free,
right? And
then they gave you. What are the ages?
I don't know.
But then you could get
something on top of that.
Like 4 guest passes.
Right.
So you could bring in your own child at least a couple times,
Yeah. So the next way that's still somewhat official would be if you're a member of the HSLDA, that's the Homeschool Legal Defense Association. They will print you one if you want one.
Oh, do you just send them a picture?
I don't know for sure. But I do know that they will produce a teacher card for you.
And I'm guessing you give them, like, you would say your school name.
Right, if you're privately homeschooling and all of that stuff. So if you have a registered PSA, is what we call it here in California, your private school affidavit, you have to provide your private school name. So it could just be the Coop Homeschool Academy or whatever you want to do. Yeah, and so I think they will print it on there and laminate it and send it to you.
Yeah, don't use the Coop Homeschool Academy. That might be our thing,
And then the third is you can make your own. So if you like some minimal graphic design, we always recommend Canva.
Yeah, there might be even templates.
Sure, totally. You can make ID cards and just print them on regular paper and laminate them. Because if you're a homeschool parent listening, I'm sure you have a laminator.
Yeah, or at least someone you know.
Exactly. So you can laminate your own ID card, and you're a teacher of your own private school. How is that not legit?
Too legit to quit.
Yes. And then here's the fourth one that I thought of that I'm pretty sure you could do. There's all kinds of homeschool moms running that side hustle. I bet you there's some that will design a card for you.
Like through Etsy or Pinterest or something?
Absolutely. So.
Well, and there's the fifth way.
Oh.
Through your charter school.
We already said that. That was number one.
Oh, that was number one. I thought you said.
Charter school was number one. Then HSLDA was number two.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was so long ago.
I know. I have no memory. I tuned out.
Yeah. So that's how you can get a school ID and use it for all those great discounts that you might need.
Yeah. Do kids ever need a student ID?
Not usually. We've never really gotten harassed anywhere. Student ID for discounts, like.
I mean, they can look at you and know you're a student unless you're like maybe 16.
Right. I think that's the only time where it comes into play is if you're getting a discount for like movie theater tickets, like student discount at places. But I'm pretty sure most children look like students.
Yeah.
And it's compulsory.
Yeah.
So there's definitely students of some kind, whether it's your private homeschool or a public school.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's our question. And that's it. Thanks for listening. We love your support. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast, leave a rating and review to let us know how we're doing, and share our podcast with your friends who need a little community, humility, and joyful fun in homeschooling.